foreign predatory parasitic corporations are replacing our natural environment with an industrial landscape of wind turbines. One Nation will stand against sending children down a path of drug dependency and body mutilation to appease the gender cult. Leave our kids alone. The Trusted Digital Identity Bill is a global surveillance and control mechanism that profit-hungry corporations and power-mad politicians drafted and crafted. One Nation opposes this inhuman, dystopian future that the United Nations promotes as the Great Reset, and we condemn this Parliament for signing onto it. I called for Australia to reject the World Economic Forum's Great Reset and instead mount a great resist. Just like the koalas being euthanised to make way for wind turbines or damaged solar panels leaking toxic heavy metals into waterways, the United Nations net zero plan again involves killing the environment to save it. I've been speaking about the fear, the oppression and the inhuman cruelty of our COVID response since July 2020. I promised to hound down those responsible, and I will continue relentlessly to keep that promise. You're about to be live with me, Senator Malcolm Roberts. G'day. We've got a packed session this afternoon. Craig Kelly is going to join me. He's got some wonderful slides that he shared with the forum that I attended in Sydney a couple of weeks ago. We're having some technical difficulties with Craig, so we'll get him in as soon as we can. First question I was going to ask Craig: who said this recently? Freedom is a privilege. Freedom is a privilege. Think about that. Did Klaus Schwab say it? Joe Biden say it? Would it be something Stalin would have said? Hitler? Chairman Mao? Would it be something the Safety Commissioner said? Zuckerberg? Gates? Antonio Guterres? Albanese? Scott Morrison? Dan Andrews? What do you think? Who said that? Who said freedom is a privilege? David Littleproud said it. He's a driver of the parasitic globalist agenda. No, freedom is not a bloody privilege. It is a universal birthright, a universal birthright. Now, certainly freedom does involve responsibilities. We're each accountable for what we do. But freedom is not a privilege. What it reveals, his using those words, in my view, is that controlled tendencies are driving the Nationals, the Liberals, and the Labor Party. The Labor Liberal Uniparty has a history of pushing the global control agenda. What I want to get onto today is some economic slides that Craig Kelly developed, and he's very, very good on numbers. So I want to get onto that as soon as we can. But I also want to provide an update on many key topics. Now, the National Day of Protest, you can see me smiling already, the National Day of Protest against the digital ID last Sunday, May the 5th. Rallies in every mainland capital city except Canberra. That's going to be scheduled for one day when Parliament is sitting, so Albanese can hear the people. The speakers in Brisbane, and I was going to ask Craig to do the speakers in Sydney, list the speakers in Sydney. I'll just make a note of it when he joins us. In Brisbane, Professor James Allen, George Christensen, John Humphreys, Daisy Cousins, Jason Miles, and myself. And we got compliments for every one of those speakers. And I believe every one of them was fantastic. I listened to all of them. They made a lot of sense, and they spoke with conviction and knowledge and authority. Our MC for the day, Kate McCullum from Kilkivan General Store. I won't go into her background. It's littered with so many achievements. She's been awarded for her work in the police force. She knows her stuff. She's got energy. She's got talent. She's got guts. She's got courage. And she's been speaking around the state and interstate, doing great work, exposing the lie that solar and wind are going to be good for us. Craig, you're in, mate.
Hey, Malcolm, great to be with you. And I'm sorry I missed that earlier comments about that quote. Who said freedom was what?
It's a privilege.
A privilege. Like, yeah, when you told me, I thought I was thinking maybe Dan Andrews or Chairman Stalin or someone like that, or maybe Kim Jong up in North Korea. But to think that the leader of the National Party thinks that way, it just shows what's actually happened to the Nationals. It is quite sad. Anyone that has that ideology, there's two ways you should think. Either you are born free, and it's the government that takes away your rights, or you are born as a slave and the government gives you your rights. And when someone like Littleproud makes those comments, he's telling us what side of the fence he sits. and where his ideology is. So his ideology is basically you are born a slave, and only the elites, like good David Littleproud, give you your freedom from government. It is a betrayal of everything that the Nationals used to stand for.
Absolutely correct. And David Littleproud has been pushing the globalist agenda with biodiversity bills, with carbon dioxide farming. I mean, the guy is pushing policies that are destroying the regional areas of our country, destroying primary production in our country, destroying the people he's supposed to be supporting. But Craig, I just mentioned the list of speakers in Brisbane. Can you tell us about the rally in Sydney against the digital identity? Oh, and by the way, before I finish on Brisbane, we had a special guest band, the Emily James Trio, and they've got a new album out, the Emily James Trio. Thoroughly recommended, wonderful. So, if you can tell us about the speakers in Brisbane and in Sydney, Craig, and how it went.
Yeah, we had a fantastic rally in Sydney as well, and we had pouring. Well, actually, it was forecast. The Bureau of Meteorology had forecast an 85% probability of torrential rain. And of course, you can guess what happens to the thing. The heavens held off for us for our rally, and we didn't get a drop of rain during the rally sort of thing. But look, the rain kept a few people away, but we still had a absolutely fantastic turnout. And we did it at a place, a historic place in Sydney called Speaker's Corner. Now, that was modelled off Speaker's Corner in London, in Sydney back here in the 1870s. That was first set up. That's been the traditional home of free speech. So I couldn't think of a better place to have a rally against the ID, that hideous national identity bill, that ID bill, and also for freedom of speech and Speaker's Corner. So, look, we had some great speakers. We had Alexandra Marshall that was there. She was one of our key speakers.
I watched her speech on Facebook, mate, and she was fabulous. Fabulous.
Yeah. Another girl called Beck Freedom, that's been a freedom fighter for during the COVID period for many years now. It was great to have young girls there. I want to say young, I mean in their around about the age of 30 sort of thing, in there actually fighting and believing the importance of freedom of speech and against this digital ID bill. That was really fantastic. We had another lady who was a candidate for us at the last election called Natalie Duma, and Natalie's a dentist. And Natalie and her family migrated out to Australia from the USSR, the old Soviet Union. And Natalie told the story about how her parents fled the Soviet Union, how many of her grandparents disappeared during the period of time. They came to Australia because they thought we were a free country. We had freedom of speech. As Natalie said, there's nowhere else left to go to. This is it. We're the last stand. While her parents could flee Russia or the communist, the communist-controlled old Soviet Union to come to Australia, she said for herself, there's nowhere else to flee to. This is it. She's got to stand and fight. We had Ross Cameron, Ross, a former Liberal Party member that's has seen the light. Ross was actually previously a member of the Liberal Party Howard government, an old member for Parramatta from the Liberal Party. He's come across.
Good guy.
He's abandoned the Liberal Party. He realised they no longer stand for what they believe in. We also had John Ruddick, the MLC from the New South Wales Parliament. And finally, we had special guests. We had from Vancouver, Canada, we had Billboard Chris, that he's known by. I think it's Chris Elston, I think his real name is. But he goes by Billboard Chris on Facebook, and many people would follow him, how he's been sort of rallying for the call against this crazed gender ideology and basically what is, I would call it physical mutilation and drugging of young children because they're
chemical castration
about their gender in teenage years. So we had a great lineup. It was a great day. Everyone was very, very pleased with it. And what was great to see was there was one nation was out flying the flag on this. Now, where were the Liberals are supposedly the champions of free speech and the fighting against the digital ID bill? The Liberals were all at home under their doonas hiding, and it was one nation out around the nation with rows around the nation fighting and pushing back against this. It just shows, Malcolm, every single day, it shows that one nation is the true opposition party in this country. We've got a uni party, a Liberal and Labor joined at the hip, are governing this country, and it's only one nation that's providing any opposition.
Exactly. And remember, Craig, you spoke up against, and within the party, when you were in the Liberal Party, you spoke up against this very strongly within the party because the Liberals actually introduced the digital identity bill to the Parliament.
The digital ID was a Liberal Party idea, right? It was proposed during the last Liberal government, the same as the mis and disinformation bill. that was also a Liberal Party idea, right? Signing us up to net zero was a Liberal Party policy of the last government. Signing us up to the Paris targets was Liberal Party policy. So all these things that we are now fighting against, that we see as so detrimental to our country, originated with the Liberal Party. It is truly, look, it's the Liberal Party have betrayed their roots. It is very sad that someone that was a member of that party for over a decade, that marched in the streets with Tony Abbott against the carbon tax, to see how they've sold out on every single policy platform is just appalling. And just an example of in the last 24 hours, we've seen over there in Tuvalu, the Liberals, Senator Birmingham, holding hands with Penny Wong, giving, I think it was $38 million to the Tuvaluans for climate change issues. Now, the peer-reviewed science on this is absolutely crystal clear. The Tuvalu is growing in size. Right? It's great. That's the evidence. It's not even debatable. Tuvalu is not sinking. It is growing in size. Even the ABC fact check admitted that. And yet,
so the significance of it growing in size, Craig, is that either the sea is falling, the sea levels are falling, or the island is rising.
You get the accretion as those coral reefs break down. You get the accretion of the wind, and it brings it on shore, and the tide brings it on shore, and it builds up. That's how a coral reef. If you read, Charles Darwin's work and Charles Darwin's theories, Charles Darwin put forward the theory that coral reefs actually rise and fall with the level of the sea, so they don't go under or they don't get bigger. That was Charles Darwin's theory, and it's been proven correct. At the moment, you've got these islands in the Pacific growing in size, and yet you've got Penny Wong over there with the Liberals Birmingham handing out, I think it was $38 million on these climate change things. And you've got people up there in Brisbane and around the country and all towns everywhere living in tents and under bridges because there's a real crisis. There's a housing crisis in this country. And we've got the Liberal and Labor Party over there grandstanding, denying the science and giving Australian taxpayers money to the, for basically just on a scam.
So they're literally exposing the uni party. We've got the leader of the government in the Senate, Senator Penny Wong, got the leader of the opposition in the Senate, Senator Simon Birmingham, both from South Australia, and they're both over there together as the uni party, sending our money to them for bullshit, basically.
$38 million of Australian taxpayer money for some climate change initiative to, supposedly because the island under the delusion and ignoring the peer-reviewed science that these islands are actually growing in size. Malcolm, it is just...
Okay,
I get lost for words.
It's deceit, mate. It's deceit. It's fraud. So let's continue, because there are a couple of key things I want to get through, as I explained at the early part before you joined us, Craig. I want to get through some really powerful news items this week, and then I want to get on to the highlight of today, which will be your summary of slides summarising the economics. Now, I just want to make a quick announcement that we were approached by Jody Lowe, who's doing tremendous work, as I understand it, in Central Queensland, getting people awake. A miner came to him and explained that he has passed his medical to get a job as a coal miner in one of the Central Queensland mines. But to get his certificate that he's healthy and fit for work, he has to have a digital ID to get that from the Queensland Medical Department. A digital ID. He can't get it by showing a passport, because he's tried. He can't get it by showing his driver's license and other documents. He has to get a digital ID. So Katie Gallagher said it was going to be voluntary. That is compulsory. If he wants to feed his kids and earn a living, he has to have a digital ID. So we've given him some suggestions as to how to go about countering that, and we're also going to be writing to Gallagher, pointing out that the Queensland digital ID under the Labor government is compulsory, that we've also been notified that the Commonwealth Public Service security clearances will require a digital ID. So much for Senator Gallagher saying it's voluntary. It is compulsory. It's another government blatant lie when they said it was non-compulsory. Everyone, this is your last chance. We know that the Labor Party has put on the agenda for the House of Representatives this coming week, the budget week, the passage of the Digital Identity Bill. Write to your MPs in the lower house. Liberal, Labor, Greens, write to them, tell them no. Craig, I'm going to let you do most of the talking on this. AstraZeneca has been withdrawn Now, there must be a hell of a temptation on your part to say, I told you so. Greg Hunt and Dan Andrews have been throwing each other under the bus. Mate, the blaming of others to deflect personal liability has started. It's started.
Correct. And Victoria does have personal liability laws for those that have made decisions in executive positions that have led to people's deaths, which are both what Hunt and Andrews have been arguably been involved in. Look, Malcolm, this should have happened, a couple of years ago. The data was...
Well, they should never have been introduced.
In March of 2021, the data was clear that there was a significant problem with AstraZeneca. And we had countries all around Europe. It was Germany, I think Spain, Norway, Sweden, Italy. The list went on and on and on, sort of thing, of these countries that pulled it off the market, right? But the two places that weren't pulled off the market were the UK for political reasons, because it was a UK, basically it was generated out of the UK, out of Oxford University. And Oxford University were making millions in royalties and profits out of it. And Boris Johnson, of course, was pushing AstraZeneca so strongly. So they didn't do anything about it. And, of course, Australia. We ignored the science. So they kept on saying it was safe. Now, and they said, we don't think there's any problem here. Look, what they did wrong, Malcolm, it wasn't up to prove the vaccine. It wasn't up to prove the vaccines had some problem with it. It was up to the vaccine to prove itself being safe, right? That's who the obligation is upon. And you look at these guys, like all these chief medical officers from all around the country, and that Paul Kelly, they were going around saying, there's nothing wrong here. There's no problem, right? And about a month later, they realised the evidence was just so overwhelming. Then they cut it out for, I think, all the under 60s, when they should have pulled. It might have been all the under 50s they pulled out. And in that window of time when they should have acted and they didn't, young Australians got injected and died. There were young Australians in that period when it should have been suspended in Australia that took the AstraZeneca and died. Now these people should.
It's homicide, Craig. It is homicide.
They should all be held liable. They knew, or they should have known, in the positions of that, they should have known that product should have been pulled from the market. And of course, it was pulled from the market quietly here in Australia without any fanfare about a year ago. And now we've seen AstraZeneca admit in court that there are significant problems with their vaccine, and have withdrawn it worldwide. Look, it was just, and to think, Australians were forced to take this and mandated to take it. This is why we need a Royal Commission. And it was good today, although it was belated, to see Tony Abbott come out and be very strong in his comments about calling for a Royal Commission. But then I asked Tony, I said, Tony's a good mate and I have great respect for him, but where was he when the Liberal Party of this country were introducing medical fascism and forcing people to be injected? Right? It would have been nice to have some strong comments from Tony back then. But look, as I said, better late than never. And we need that Royal Commission. It needs to be a thorough Royal Commission to look into these things, because we've got to make sure that whatever happened before and all the things that went wrong can never, ever happen again in this country.
Well, I'll get onto that in a minute. But I just want to remind everyone that despite AstraZeneca being pulled from every country on the earth, the approval for AstraZeneca is still in force with the Health Department of Australia. The Health Department still approves it. We need compensation now, Craig. We need a Royal Commission now. And then we need to ask the question, which party did this? It was the Uni Party again that did this, Liberal Labor at state and federal level. So getting onto the COVID Royal Commission, the COVID inquiry that I moved the motion for and that was accepted and went through the Senate to draft to ask a committee of inquiry to draft the Royal Commission terms of reference for a possible future Royal Commission. The report has been handed down, and I have to say publicly that I commend Senator Paul Scar. He hasn't been one of the 5 or 6 that have been pushing the accountability on COVID mismanagement, but he has delivered a fantastic report, and I must commend him for the way he led the inquiry. He was very open, very fair. The report's been handed down. It is comprehensive. The inquiry submissions and witness testimonies, Craig, were stunning. The best submission I've ever seen was written by the People Submission with 46,000 signatories and headed up by a team of experts with Jason Gillespie, a former barrister, at the top. The witness testimony was stunning. Every one of the 19 witnesses on the first day, every one of the 10 or 15 witnesses on the second day was not only saying we need a Royal Commission, they said with passion, with conviction, and with strength that we need a Royal Commission. So I'll go through the recommendations. There's only 4. Paul's done a phenomenal job, as has the Secretariat of the committee, pulling it all together. They had a mountain of material to pull together. Here are the 4 recommendations. The committee recommends that the federal government establishes a Royal Commission to examine the Australian response to the COVID pandemic and the consequential impacts on the Australian community. Second recommendation, the committee recommends that the federal government encourages the states and territories to pass complementary legislation that would enable them to participate in the Royal Commission. State and territory governments that do not initially join the Royal Commission should be able to join the Royal Commission at a later date if they agree to do so. Wonderful comment. Also, I must commend Scott Prasser from Queensland on his testimony. He's written 2 books on Royal Commissions and he did a fabulous job. Third recommendation, the committee recommends that the federal government adopt the terms of reference outlined in paragraphs 3.99 and 3.100 as the draft terms of reference. And they are absolutely comprehensive. Absolutely comprehensive. And they throw down the gauntlet to Albanese's government, because if they deviate from that, it'll show there's going to be whitewashing in setting up the Royal Commission. So the template is there, thanks to my motion and thanks to Paul Scar and the many wonderful witnesses for a solid Royal Commission, a fair and objective Royal Commission. The fourth recommendation, the last recommendation, the committee recommends that the draft terms of reference for a COVID-19 Royal Commission are made available for public comment to allow the people of Australia an opportunity to provide input on the terms of reference prior to their adoption. The next step, I had a discussion with Paul Scar and a couple of other senators, is for the Senate to move a motion next week calling on the Prime Minister to appoint the Royal Commission and get on with the job. So which party did this? One Nation did it, with the crossbench, with Senator Ralph Babet and members of the Liberal Party and the National Party, I think, and maybe even some of the other crossbenchers who are normally with the government. I think they came on our side as well, Craig. So,
if I could just say, none of that would have happened without One Nation in the Senate.
No.
This is why we need to make sure at this next election, if anyone's watching, to put your vote for One Nation, both in the lower house and Senate, because it is that alternate voice, that representation is get things done. If it was left to the Liberal Party, they wouldn't have done anything about it. It was One Nation pushing them to try and get that inquiry up so you could at least have some discussion about how a Royal Commission should work.
Right. Next, we'll move on to the United Nations World Health Organization so-called pandemic treaty, or what do they call it now? Protocol? No, there's another term they're using. And the International Health Regulation Amendments. A few of us are getting together to write a letter to the Prime Minister saying, do not sign this. It was drafted by Alex Antic, with a number of us agreeing, and then I said it needed to be stronger, and it also needed to have the latest information. So Alex has incorporated that. We've now got a solid letter, and he's running it through the Liberals to see who will sign it and send it to Albanese next week when we're in Parliament. We'll all sign it. So remember, One Nation was the first. I was the first to come out against the World Health Organization Pandemic Treaty in April of 2022. We made videos that went around the world. My video went global. The other members of parliaments in various places, in various countries, especially in Europe, picked it up, and they did the same thing. The Africans, on their own accord, have said, to hell with the World Health Organization. We're tired of you fellas using Africans as guinea pigs and killing thousands of Africans for big pharma trials. So that's where that stands. And which party signed us up to the initiation of this pandemic treaty revision and international health regulation amendments? Liberal Labor Party. And we sided with the United States on that.
Well, Malcolm, I remember at the last election, it was both of us were trying to raise this as an issue about this World Health Organization Global Pandemic Treaty and the changes to the international health regulations. And we were labeled conspiracy theorists. I remember that greatly. And I remember, and it was both the Labor Party and the Liberal Party that said, nothing to see here, this is good, we're going to sign this up. You know, it is to think that you would give more power to a group run by Tedros, an Ethiopian Marxist, and financed by Bill Gates, right, who has an enormous say in what happens to that World Health Organization, who got at COVID just about every single thing wrong during COVID. Remember, the World Health Organization was the ones that first of all said, "Oh, you know, there's no problem here. You don't need to close the borders to China. You know, you can't. It's not a contagious virus." They got every single thing wrong, and now they want to be rewarded with more power. Are you kidding me? And look, our bureaucrats are bad enough, but to think you're going to have bureaucrats somewhere overseas in Geneva or Brussels somewhere, completely unaccountable to Australia, completely unelected, and give them the power is just, it is beyond madness. It seriously is. And we hope that, you know, again, let's keep talking about this, keep raising the volume on it, because Australia just should never, ever sign this treaty.
Right. The next thing is, just to show how the COVID lies are unraveling, there has been a motion passed through the Senate to have recognition. The Senate acknowledges the excess mortality. That was pushed by Ralph Babet, with a number of us supporting him. That got through the Senate. So the next thing was, we raced up to Ralph and said, a few of us raced up to Ralph and said, "Mate, now you've got to push for an excess mortality inquiry." And Ralph drafted it, and it got up too. So the point of mentioning this is that the Senate is changing. It's starting to wake up. It has been waking up for about 12 months. And what we've got now is an inquiry, a public inquiry into the excess mortality in the last few years. So please, if you've got someone near to you who died, then make a submission. If you've got anything to say on it, make a submission. It's just like my inquiry into the terms of reference. It's an opportunity for people to vent their spleen, to put the data out there, to reveal what they're thinking and what they're needing on COVID mismanagement. So congratulations, Senator Babet, you've got it up. And what it shows, Craig, is that we've got a very small but growing number of people in Parliament. Most of them are senators, closely aligned with us, and we are working together, and that's growing now, to expose this climate. As I said in the introductory video, we will hound these bastards down.
Just a couple of points on that, Malcolm. Firstly,
yeah,
it shows that our Senate is, at the moment, and has for years, it's diverted from its true historical role, which was to review the legislation. Now, when you've got the Senate controlled by the major political parties, it just becomes a rubber stamp. It doesn't do its job. Now, if you look back to the history, the idea of our Senate was a state's house where it would review the legislation, and the major parties would not control that Senate. It would be independent in that way from the lower house. But we've seen over recent decades that people just sort of tend to vote the same way in the upper house as they do in the lower house. And we need people to consider the true historical role of the Senate, and that is the House of Review, and you've got to keep the major parties out of the Senate. Just the other thing also on these excess deaths. The Australian Bureau of Statistics has a lot of questions to answer about this. Right? Now, they used to publish the excess death data on a monthly basis, and even though it was always several months behind compared to the rest of the world, but at least they would publish it. And they would give us an excess death number for a particular month that was in comparison to that month of the average of the previous 4 years. Now, you can argue about the methodology, you know, it could be different. There could be trend lines put in there, but the average of, we just take the average of the last 4 years the way we do it. And every month we would get a number. And we had month after month after month of highly significant excess mortality in double digit, which should have the alarm bells screaming. And the mainstream media went all quiet on this. There was hardly an article anywhere. It should have been front page news. It should have been the lead bulletin on the ABC. And remember, during COVID, they'd read out a daily death toll of, old Mrs. Smith died today and she was 87, and Jim Johnson passed away overnight and he was 96 of COVID. They gave us a daily death toll during COVID, which wasn't showing any excess mortality. And when we've got excess mortality in each month in the thousands, they all went quiet. Now, what the ABS have done in their last report, they're hidden the data. Now, it's quite a significant thing to say that the Australian Bureau of Statistics, that should be the very pinnacle of independent advice down there in Canberra, to hide the data. And that is exactly what they have done. Instead of taking the average on the last 4 years, They are now taking just last year. So they report their latest report. They say for January 2024 was the data they put out. They say, oh, look, it's the deaths were comparable with January 2023. Nothing to see here. No numbers of excess mortality, right? And a whole lot of gobbledygook. The headline is, the same as last year's, right? Implying nothing to see there. If you go back to last year, January 2023, we had, I think it was 12.3% excess mortality, a rate that I said that should have the alarm bells screaming. It is beyond, the reason this is happening, Malcolm. There's just so many people that we know the most likely cause of this excess mortality has been the COVID injections. It's not proven. That is the most. All evidence points to that. If you're a police officer, you'd say that's the most likely cause. You'd have that person locked up for the public protection.
It's not only most likely; it's highly likely, mate. It's highly likely.
That's good. Yeah. Now, the problem is the cheer squad for that was the mainstream media and the uni party and like government bureaucrats. So they are now being as quiet as they can, like church mouses, trying to sort of pretend that this actually hasn't, happened, and sort of shut down any debate on it. And now to have the Australian Bureau of Statistics hiding data, we've seen the corruption of so many of our, those groups, alphabet agencies in Canberra. But to think that Australian Bureau of Statistics can no longer be trusted to put the data out just as it stands without trying to put some political spin on it is really a new low.
Right, and what we saw at the presentation where Craig and I made presentations in Guildford in Sydney previous week was that someone had come up with an analysis of the ABS data. Now, I don't know this man. Craig does, and Craig verified it on the spot that he's on the right track. What he's done, he's shifted up the baseline. That's what Craig means by hiding the data. They've shifted the baseline. It's not statistically correct. Now, I got that checked by a member of our staff team in the Senate, and he said the submission is spot on. The ABS is guilty. So, as Craig said, what party did this? The Uni Party, Labor and Liberal. Craig,
This is why you should have a strong opposition. So when the government of the day does that, right, when you've got the Australian Bureau of Statistics doing something like this, it should be the opposition party screaming the house down, right? But you've got absolutely dead silence from the Liberal Party. They're going along with it. And again, who's it left to do the hard work in opposition? The opposition in this country? One nation.
Right. So now let's get on to what I think is the highlight of today. I mean, these are very powerful points that we've had to raise, but I'd like Craig to present his slides on the economy, because the people at Guildford were absolutely enraptured when they saw that. We had hundreds of people in Guildford at a forum, and Craig, can you take over and show us those slides on the economy?
The first one here just shows the perilous state of the economy at the moment. The first one shows the retail sales, I think, is there for the month of April. Now, retail sales actually went backwards. They fell 0.4%. Now, taking that in context, that is the actual value. So it's not adjusted for inflation. So you've had all the inflationary factors come through, which push prices up, which should have seen retail sales increase, but retail sales went backwards. And Malcolm, that also doesn't count. Remember, in the month of February, we had an extra 105,000 people alone in that 1 month come into the country. So you've got this record migration intake, which should be pushing retail sales upwards, because all those people they've got to buy food, they've got to buy clothing, they've got to buy, they'll buy beverages, they might buy coffees, and so on and so on and so on and so on and so on. Despite having all those extra people coming into the country, retail sales are going backwards, because the average punter in the streets has got less and less money in his pocket. The economy is going backwards. The wealth of this country is falling, and we see that in retail sales. A lot of the retailers out there today must be doing it very, very tough.
So are they sales in each retail category for the same month last year as this month?
It's total retail sales. So they compare
for the month. Which month?
Right? So I think that's March, Malcolm. So that's
what I would have guessed.
March. So that's March 24, right? That's what you see. That's the dark blue. You see it going backwards compared to March 2023. So you can say that's not saying. So you'd expect those to be going forward, but they've been going backwards, which is an absolute a disaster for the country.
And Craig, you mentioned the impact of immigration. They should all be highly positive graphs, because
correct,
we had
yeah.
an extra
Sorry,
560,000 people net migration. When 700,000 came into the country, 140,000 left. We had 560,000 increase in population in the last 12 months due to immigration alone. That's permanent immigration, and yet the retail sales are still going backwards.
So just to correct that, it was comparison to the previous month. So I compared March 2024 to February 24. That's what I'm saying. That's why it's so significant, because in February 2024, you had that extra 105,000 people come into the country.
Yep.
So you should have
and
seen
it's still negative.
a big uptick, and you're still going negative in retail sales. That's total retail sales across all retail categories.
Okay.
Next one.
Yep.
Right. Okay. This is a very interesting graph. This shows household disposable income, right? So disposable income is calculated by how much wage increase that you've had on average, less the inflation component. So if wages go up 10% and inflation goes up 10%, there's been no real change. But if your inflation is going up faster than wages, your real household disposable income is going backwards. And that's what you can see there in this graph. You can see there where the little Australian flag is. Disposable income, household disposable income in this country is per capita is going backwards, as well we see with the US. The average of the OECD countries and the G7 are all in positive territory. We are in negative territory. We're one of the worst performing countries in the developed world when it comes to disposable household income. So simply people have got less. And when you take everything into account, with inflation and wages that may have gone up, people are going backwards in this country under the Labor and Liberal parties. Okay. Next one.
Yep, and that's despite us being per capita the richest country in the world for resources. And we've got marvelous farming resources, climate resources, water not being managed well, but we've got good water. And we've also got especially energy minerals, largest exporter of hydrocarbon fuels in the world. We've got huge exports of other minerals and metals. And look at it. We're the only one of the major developed countries that is going negative. The rest are all positive, and yet we've got the best resources.
Well, Malcolm, that's the reason why this madness, net zero madness that we have in the place, right, attacks Australian industry more than anything else. All our industries, whether it's, as you said, our coal, our gas, our mining sector, our beef sector, all the sectors that we have a strong competitive advantage in are all the ones most affected by this net zero madness.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone, we look at all these countries, you see these countries, we're going to close down all our coal-fired power stations here. Some countries say that. And then when you look at the data, these countries don't have any coal-fired power stations. They've often got plenty of hydro because of the mountain and topography they have and the rainfall that they have. And that's so closing down coal-fired power stations doesn't hurt them at all. But here in Australia, when we close down those coal-fired power stations, that has a really big whack on electricity prices, which makes consumers poorer and makes business less competitive. And we see that in these numbers here with Australia's going back.
And then we see Italy and Germany building. We see Italy and Germany building more coal-fired power stations. Right. We see China building them rapidly, India building them rapidly. So the sane world is going to building more coal-fired power stations, and we are shutting them down and exporting our coal.
Just on some of the numbers from China I saw about a month ago, it was something like 132 gigawatts of new coal-fired power stations were under construction in China. Right? Now that was not in planning stage, but actually under physical construction, 132 gigawatts. We've got 21 gigawatts in total left. So China is building 6 times more than our entire fleet that we are closing down. And they've already got like 1,000, it's something like 1,000 gigawatts of coal-fired capacity compared to our 21. It is just complete and utter madness that what we are doing to this country. It is making us poorer, and it is the low-income earners, Malcolm, the Aussie battlers.
Still there, Craig? until Craig comes back, I'll just go on to the next point. So, which party did this to us? It was the Uni Party again, Liberal and Labor. Every major, it looks like Craig might be coming back. Every major climate and energy policy was introduced by the Liberal Party. When the next Labor Party government came in, it turbocharged them and increased the damage. I thought Craig was coming back. There are two components to trust. The first is competence. If someone is telling the truth but they're incompetent, is Craig back? If someone is telling the truth but is incompetent, you can't trust them. If someone is competent but not telling the truth, you can't trust them. But that's what we've got with Liberal and Labor. Both are incompetent and both are dishonest. We've seen that during the COVID mismanagement. We can see my staff team in the Senate here, Senate office, has prepared some material on the forthcoming budget. Cost of living, dramatically increasing. Inflation, still high. Energy costs, dramatically increasing. We'll be putting more figures out on this next week. Big immigration, huge increase. All of these are contributing to people's standard of living going backwards in our country. All of them are contributing. And all of them have been self-inflicted by the Albanese government and by the previous Morrison government. We now see the goods goods demand has been increasing on the demand side of goods, driving up the price, and by the supply side decreasing during COVID. And so we've had goods fueling inflation because the prices have gone up with less supply and more demand. Now, though, the goods are starting to increase again, so that's leveling off. But what we've got is still got inflation above normal, well above normal. That's because of services. The demand for services has increased because of our high immigration. Are you with us, Craig? I can see his face, but I can't hear him.
Maybe you guys have to. There we go. Got me back.
There you go. Let's just finish this point here. And the demand for services has increased because of high immigration, and we've had artificial restrictions on the supply side of services, which is due to energy and the printing of money. So we've got supply of services driving inflation figures. And we've also got one other thing. The only reason we are in surplus budget-wise is because of mining and agriculture. Prices are higher than normal, and we've been booming in our exports of both mining and agriculture. Last year, the previous budget to that, and this year, again, I will bet that the Labor Party does not give credit to the mining sector, nor to the agricultural sector, but happily takes their money and keeps us in surplus. So that's the summary of the economics message. But I want Craig to go back and now go through the details. These are fascinating slides, Craig.
Yeah, we've got the next slide to come up. Just while we're waiting for that next, here we go. Right. Now, this was some OEC data that came out, I think about a fortnight ago. Right? And they looked at the OECD measured the change in personal average tax rates between 2022 and 2023. Right? And what they found, guess which country had the worst or the highest increase in tax? Good old Australia. We had a 7.6% increase in the amount of personal income tax that Australians were paying in that 1 year. Right? We were a country mile ahead of the rest of the world. The only other one that could come close was New Zealand. Right? That was under the previous Jacinta's government, that crazy government they had over there. They got to 4.5%. You can see the rest of the world is in a narrow band between about a 2.5% increase and about a 2% decrease. Right? We had a 7.6 increase. The government is taking record amounts of money out of Australians' pockets. Right? And then we're going to have the budget, and they're going to give us a few pennies back, and we're supposed to thank them about how wonderful they are. You know, this was, and remember, this is on top of real disposable incomes going backwards. So we've got inflation running faster than what wages are increasing. And then so you're left with a smaller amount of cash, and the government is taking a bigger slice of that smaller amount of cash than what you've got. And we wonder why businesses and families are struggling so much. And a lot of this money, Malcolm, you've seen in Canberra, is sprayed everywhere. It's wasted everywhere. I said, like the example today with Penny Wong in Birmingham, $38 million for climate change in Tuvalu. and when the place is growing in size, not when the island's growing in size. It was $100 million the other day to Tedros over in the World Health Organization. They are spraying money all over the place. You see, we've got the e-safety commissioner. Her budget was kicked up to $40 million. More bigger bureaucracies in Canberra all the time. They're just putting more and more pressure and strain on the Australian families. And now we're going to have budget week, and they'll tell us how wonderful Albanese is that we'll get a few dollars in a so-called tax cut, which is a fraction, just a small fraction of the money that they've pinched off us over the last 12 months in higher taxes.
How many slides have you got left to go, Craig? Because we've got
I'm not
about...
sure. Got them. We'll rip through them pretty quickly. Okay. The next one, we are in a GDP per capita recession. Right? Now, traditionally, GDP is measured by the size of the economy, which is gross domestic product, right? So if Australia annexed Papua New Guinea into our economy, or maybe a couple of islands in Indonesia, our economy would grow in size. In total, we'd have a bigger economy, and we'd see the GDP is growing. Right? And then so there's no recession. But what really counts is GDP per capita. So that means the average citizens, the size of the average citizen's slice of the pie. So yes, the pie is getting bigger with record migration, but when you cut that pie up into more slices, the slices are getting smaller. So we've had 3 quarters in a row of where we've been going backwards in GDP per capita. So we're creating less wealth in this country per person, and that's why you see all the problem with homelessness, food in prices, electricity. The nation is going backwards because of this madness, this insane madness of net zero that we are enforcing. And it's only going to get worse unless we have a complete change of track.
Yep.
Okay. This one shows the huge surge in taxation revenue that Albanese has been getting. Now you can see there in the percentage change, the dollar changes in billions is the left-hand side column. The right-hand side is the percent change. So those bars show us what we're up to. So we're up to about 2022, 2023, $750 billion was the tax take, right? That's up from less than $600 billion in 2020, 2021. So the last 2 years, there's been an extra $150 billion taken out of the pockets of hardworking Australians going into taxation. As I said, that's what we've seen. A 7.6% increase in personal tax rates has gone up in this country. So the government, Albanese, is getting more and more revenue. Consumers are having less and less. And we have this nonsense budget that comes up. They're going to tell us how wonderful they all are and how great the economy is going and how they're going to give us a few dollars back from what they've taken from us. But that just shows you that the whack again. Now, where the rubber hits the road on what's happening, Malcolm, this is a graph that shows the national percentage of emergency department visits completed in 4 hours or less. So simply, the queues at our public hospital are getting longer and longer and longer. And it takes long, and you've got less chance of getting your visit being completed in 4 hours or less. You can see there, the lowest on record the last year, down to 56%. And why is this happening? Well, when you import an extra 750,000 people into the country in 12 months, without any proportionate increase in your hospital service, what do you expect? So everyone out there today, it's not only our standard of living is going backwards because of this madness. Things that you really can't measure as a standard of living is how much longer you have to wait to go to a public hospital. And the blowout times, people suffering in pain, waiting for elective surgery as those waiting lists continue to blow out because there's more and more people in the queue. That's what's happening at the coalface out here in the suburbs of our major capital cities and our regional centres. It's not only our living standards going backwards, but the queues for hospital waiting times are being blown further and further out. This just shows how completely wrong the policies that we've got of the Labor Party today. And again, the Liberal Party out there arguing to rally against we need to cut migration. They would have exactly the same policies, and they're just making a few minor noises on the side. And that was the Liberal Party, the first ones that kicked up this migration rates in this country.
John Howard.
We used to have that migration around before the Sydney Olympics. From the end of the Second World War to the Sydney Olympics, it was average 80,000 a year net migration into this country. That gave us the great generation of Vietnamese migrants that have added so much to our country. migrants from Eastern Europe, from all over the place that added to our country, but they were able to assimilate without disturbing the economy because it was kept at 80,000 a year. Howard and the Liberals then kicked that up to over 200,000 a year, and Albanese's now doubled it up again to over 500,000 a year. A nation cannot absorb that number of new migrants, not only politically but also socially as well. But this is what we're having because he is masking over. He's doing this to try and mask over and to try and say he's creating some, I'm stimulating the economy and growing the economy by importing people. That's not how you grow the economy. You grow the economy by becoming more productive and using smarter use of your resources. We're doing the opposite. Crazy schemes like Snowy 2.0, wasting billions. That mad, what they call that rail link in Melbourne that they're building. Now, vanity projects are billions and billions of dollars wasted. So we're going to see more now on these transmission lines to hook up these wind farms and solar farms. Completely unproductive expenditure that only makes us poorer as a nation.
Yep, spot on. And I just want to mention this to you, Craig. You may already know it, but when Albanese was giving his tax change bill, it wasn't a tax cut bill because in the forward estimates, he would quickly get back the minor tax cuts he made, and we would be paying as Australians an extra $38 billion because of bracket creep. For bracket creep, for people who don't understand, is where your income goes into a higher tax bracket because of inflation, which means overall you're paying a higher tax rate. So when Albanese introduced his tax change, not tax cut, his tax change bill, I introduced an amendment saying index the brackets so that you always stay within the same brackets, you don't cross into a higher tax bracket. Labor Party voted against it. Liberal Party said, yeah, it's a good idea, but we don't think it's the right time to do it. So they voted against it. David Sharma, 2 weeks after, in his maiden speech in the Senate, said he is all in favour of indexing brackets to eliminate bracket creep. 2 or 3 weeks earlier, the same man voted against our amendment to remove bracket creep, to remove it.
That's right.
And you've just seen what Craig Kelly has shown, a huge increase in taxes. That's what's going on. Liberal, Labor, Uni-Party both objected to indexing bracket creep because they know they thrive off it. And who pays? The people of Australia.
Yeah. It's interesting. They adjust the fuel excise that we pay on fuels for inflation. So that gets indexed and goes up. So that's, I think, was now getting...
Oh, have you lost Craig again? $4:00. So what you can see, I've got to go because I have to do an interview that's been scheduled for some time on radio, TNT radio. What you can see is that our economy is in a shape that we're destroying people's livelihoods because of the mismanagement under the Uni-Party, Liberal Labor, Uni-Party. Livelihoods are being destroyed. Cost of living is increasing. It's becoming too expensive to live in this country. We're going backwards. Other developed countries are going forwards. Not only that, it affects our security, it affects our future. So just remember this, high immigration drives down wages growth, You have less money. And it drives up prices and housing costs, Inflation now is services driven. It was goods driven and demand driven. It's now services driven, and therefore it's immigration driven because immigrants are coming in. We like immigrants. In the past, Australia's been built on immigrants, but we have to stop our immigration at the moment, drastically reduce it until we catch up properly and get our economy stable and our infrastructure up and our services up. Look at the hospitals. So, Craig, final word with you, mate, because I've got to go.
Yeah, just quickly, the Reserve Bank governor made some very interesting points the other day. And she basically admitted that the higher rates of migration are pushing up inflation with one respect because they are pushing up the cost of rents, right? But you also made another interesting point that is having a bit of downward pressure on inflation because all these new migrants coming into the country are keeping wage growth low. So for the average citizen gets dudded twice, right? You get dudded that you've got all these new people coming into the country and that's putting a cap on wages, right? So there's no employers say, employees look at it, there's all these new employers coming out that will take work for less wages. So your wage is being suppressed because of the rates of migration, and yet the inflation rate's going up. Your cost of your housing is going through the roof. So the average citizen is being smashed twice by these absurd rates of migration. And we're not against migration, right? We're not against migrants. In fact, the migrants that are being harmed, the people being harmed by this, I say turbo migration, are the people that have moved into the country in the last couple of years. They're the ones suffering the most for it. And they're the ones that we are fighting for and standing up, right? It's about the complete rate, the number. We cannot have 500,000 plus migrants. You cannot have 100,000 migrants coming in one single month when we used to have just 80,000 a year. It is causing so much harm. You put that and you put the nonsense of net zero, two things that only one nation are fighting for. And you can see why this country is going backwards 100 miles an hour. And what's more important than ever, that you and Pauline and everyone else behind you and your teams up there, we can give you as much support as we can, and keep firing up in this next election.
Thank you very much, Craig. Thank you, everyone, for listening in. I've got to go. Thank you so much. See you next week. I'll be coming to you from South Australia. And thank you, Craig, for being with us. You're a marvellous breath of fresh air if you think so and speak so clearly. Thank you, mate.